Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, episode number 357 for the 23rd of August 2015. Richard Saunders here with...
Jo Alabaster.
Hello, Jo.
Hello, Richard. How are you today?
Pretty good. I'm still buzzing after last night because, folks, last night Jo and I went along to see Neil deGrasse Tyson. I guess we could sort of say in concert, really.
It was pretty rockin'.
It was. He was rocking too. It was a Think Inc. event, and thanks to Think Inc. and the National Geographic Channel here in Sydney, who helped us get some tickets to the event. Yes, Neil deGrasse Tyson for over 2 hours, basically just ad-libbing, just coming up with science fact after science fact about Pluto, about gravity, answering questions, and the audience loved it.
They did indeed. It was a really vibrant show, I think.
It was a vibrant show.
Vibrant.
He's a good performer, isn't he?
He is. He seemed to really be enjoying himself, actually. 2 hours of being fairly excited.
He was. He was. And the host they had for the evening, he was fantastic too.
He was. It was Derek Miller, who does the Veritasium YouTube channel. And he's also been on television recently doing a documentary series which is produced by Sonia Pemberton, who did Jabbed.
About uranium.
That's correct,
Was it called Taming the Dragon or something like that?
I think so.
People in Australia might have seen that one, and I'm sure it'll be shown around the world because it's an excellent series about uranium and how it's changed our lives and how it works and the physics behind it and everything like that. And last week he went into a bunker, an old bunker in the United States, and actually went through the process of putting in the double keys. And yeah, it was a fascinating show. Anyway, we digress. Neil deGrasse Tyson, fantastic show. Thanks again to National Geographic Channel and Think Inc. And we look forward to future events. And just as a reminder, I was involved with the Thinking people in December last year when we toured with the James Randi, an evening with James Randi.
Yes.
Yes, and you got to go along to that too, Jo.
Oh, I did. I felt incredibly lucky for that one. Yes.
That was good. That was great. And just to remind people that you can hear an interview that I conducted with Neil deGrasse Tyson and Andrian about the Cosmos series. That's Skeptic Zone episode number 279, which was in February 2014. You can look that one up.
And how lucky were you to be able to get to do that? That sounds like such an honour.
Luck!
Well,
Luck.
I'm not much of a skeptic,
Luck.
am I?
Luck! How dare you? Luck! But what's coming up on the Skeptic Zone this week, we're going to kick off with an interview I did a little while ago with Michael Kruse from Bad Science Watch in Canada. He's going to be telling us about the government over there, their crackdown on the wacky, bizarre, crazy, Looney Tunes claims of homeopathy.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that one.
Did I put that succinctly, Jo? I think I did.
I don't think you could put it any better.
I think you're right. After that, it's the Raw Skeptic Report with Heidi Robertson. Now, this is the first in a new series Heidi's doing about infectious diseases and the facts and the myths behind them. It's really, really interesting. And this week she's going to start that series with a look at influenza and how serious it really is. And she's going to be interviewing somebody who's lost family members to influenza.
Goodness.
Yeah. Serious stuff. But really good information this week coming from Heidi Robertson. Then a week in science from the Royal Institution of Australia, www.riaus.org.au. Hello to all the wonderful people there. And to round off the show, a guest reporter, Kevin Davies, who's from the Canberra Skeptics, and aren't they an active group? More about them later in the show, actually. Kevin chats to Glen, Nagle, the Education and Public Outreach Manager at the Canberra Deep Space Communications Complex. They're the people who send messages off to the rovers on Mars and get messages from the probe and Pluto and all that sort of stuff.
Oh, fantastic. Pluto, you say?
Pluto. Isn't that interesting?
Ooh.
Yes. Neil deGrasse Tyson had a lot to say about Pluto last night.
Indeed, and a lot of people have a lot of strong feelings about Pluto.
So it seems. So that's what's coming up on the Skeptic Zone this week. Great to have you over here at Skeptic Zone headquarters, Jo, and glad you enjoyed last night.
Very happy to be here.
I think it's time that we both run downstairs, making sure we don't trip over Fred the cat, and he was just here a moment ago. I don't know where... He was just at our feet a moment ago. Making sure we don't trip over Fred the cat, we're going to run downstairs. We're going to open the fridge, open the pantry. What are we going to find, Jo?
I have no idea.
How about some pickled vegetables we can have with some Chinese duck?
Are you cooking it?
I can try. Well, while we attempt that cooking, we hope you enjoy
The Skeptic Zone.
Joining me now from Canada. Yes, Canada, where I spent a few years when I was a very young boy indeed, in Saskatchewan. From Bad Science Watch, it's Michael Kruse. Hello, Michael.
Hello, Richard. It's great to be on the Skeptic Zone.
Thank you. It's been a while since you've been on the zone, I think.
I think that according to Skype, I spoke to you maybe last a year ago, perhaps, or longer. I don't know. It's been a while anyways.
It has been a while. Now, I thought I'd give you a call, catch up, to find out how Bad Science Watch is going generally, and also we can chat about a press release that came out on the 4th of August about homeopathic labelling. But first of all, how is Bad Science Watch going?
Well, this is our third year, I think, maybe fourth year since we sort of launched back in 2012. That would be 3 years, I guess. Math is, of course, a strong point. Yeah. And we're, as a volunteer organization, you always run the risk of, burning yourselves out into a crisp doing all this work, basically outside of your normal job. But despite that fact, our volunteers are working hard. The board is stuck with us. We're still, raising funds and doing work and talking to the press. So all in all, I'm pretty pleasantly surprised that we're continuing to do our work here in Canada, and things are going along rather swimmingly.
It's nice to hear. Now, for the benefit of our listeners who may not know, what is the general idea and the genesis of Bad Science Watch?
So Bad Science Watch is a grassroots organization in that we don't have any kind of parent company or didn't come from any weren't sort of an offshoot from anywhere. We're a collection of, computer programmers and doctors, and I'm a paramedic myself. And we are focused on promoting or advocating for good science and public policy. We saw a few years ago when we started this sort of a deficit of a really focused voice that was speaking truth to power here in Canada. Specifically in the area of health policy regulation. That's sort of where we've come down on. And we've really focused on the approval of natural health products and chosen a couple specific areas to target on. Certainly homeopathic products was a big push for us back in 2013 with our Stop No-Sodes project. We've also tackled things like the myths surrounding Wi-Fi radiation. There's a very motivated group here in Canada who are trying to force the government to lower or to increase, make more stringent the levels of radiation from wireless devices like cell phones that you can be exposed to, really counter to the science as we know it. And so we've been fighting that battle as well. But we've really been focusing, and we will continue to focus further down on health product regulation and the regulations surrounding the approval of no-sodes, and certainly in our future, the anti-vaccination movement.
Can't help but agree with you there. And again, for the benefit of the people who may not know, this Stop No-Sodes .org, which is the website, what is that about specifically? What is a no-sode?
Well, homeopathic no-sode is a preparation that starts with a piece of diseased tissue, like pus or sputum or blood, or it's really delicious. And then, of course, that comes from an individual who's suffering from a specific infectious disease, measles or pertussis, whooping cough, tuberculosis, things like that. And then that material is diluted in the normal homeopathic manner, so there's nothing left of it. In fact, the current standards ensure or insist that any product that is produced that's from a no-sode is produced in such a way as to ensure that there is no original ingredient in it.
Well, fair enough.
And then this Yeah, and then this product is used by homeopaths and other alternative medicine providers like naturopaths and chiropractors. It is used as part of a larger program to replace vaccines. So it's used as a vaccine, quote, vaccine alternative. In the way there's a couple different programs. There's a gentleman named Golden from Australia actually has his own
Dr. Golden,
program.
Yes.
You guys probably know about him very well. We have an American named Kate Birch who has a similar program out of the U.S. has been training people in Canada. Somehow she gets away with that. And these programs are meant to replace the childhood vaccination schedule. So instead of getting your proven, safe, and effective, measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine at appropriate ages, you're getting sugar pills to your child. And of course, there's no evidence that these work at all. There's plenty of a priori evidence to say that homeopathic preparations shouldn't work, and yet, despite all odds, these are actually approved by Health Canada for sale in our great country.
It's amazing. And tell me what the situation is there generally. If you go into the chemist shop or the pharmacy, can you find homeopathic products on the shelf?
Yeah, most mainstream pharmacists carry a certain selection of homeopathic pills. The kind of rack with the individual remedies, like sold by Boiron or Boiron, as they say in the U.S., that you won't really find a rack like that in most mainstream pharmacies. You will certainly see the products actually more insidiously placed beside the products that work. The mainstream products that work. So, for example, the cough, cold, and flu remedies will have inserted in them the oscillococcinum homeopathic flu remedies, as if they were of the same standard and level of efficacy. So, it's sometimes difficult for the consumer to actually tell the difference between those products. We've certainly had another problem with cough cold medicines for children, like cough medicines for children, that up until this last iteration of the guidelines were actually able to be sold with an indication on them for cough and cold symptoms for children under 12. So instead of just being homeopathic preparation X, they were homeopathic cough medicine. This was actually exposed by our CBC marketplace. CBC is the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, our national broadcaster, and they have a consumer protection show called Marketplace that actually got one of these cough cold medicines approved, a fake medicine approved by Health Canada for use for children. For cough and cold. So the process is very, very easy to get through and not very stringent, certainly. So you can find these medications everywhere. They're easy to get at. The health food stores will have more of a advanced selection. You'll be able to find the individual remedies so you can mix and match. The availability of no-sodes is a bit more difficult to pin down. Influenza 9C, which is the flu no-sode, becomes very popular, obviously, in the fall here when we have our flu season.
Yeah.
And it certainly is sold as Influenza 9C by homeopaths and pharmacists alike.
So it sounds very much like the situation here in Australia, where sadly if you walk into your average chemist shop or pharmacy and you look around, you will find homeopathic preparations for this and that. Generally speaking, in the Canadian society, is homeopathy popular? Is it a little bit alternative, as we might say? Is it accepted?
Well, there is certainly a staunch, minority of the population that support these kind of therapies. Getting marketing data on who specifically uses homeopathy is a bit difficult, in that it would cost us several thousands of dollars to sort of find out, because nobody's really reporting on the individual modalities openly.
Right.
Or in an open source way, but they're very popular. Natural remedies are certainly used by at one point by the majority of the population, be it vitamins, supplements, and including homeopathy. I would say that it's probably not as popular as more mainstream supplements, but. That being said, in Ontario, we have our a newly minted College of Homeopaths, which is registering people to be homeopaths legally. They're legally able to call themselves homeopaths in Ontario and practice. That was a recommendation to our in Ontario to our regulator that homeopaths be regulated, and they've started taking registrants as of April 1st. So this is not something that's going to go away, and it's certainly while it may be a minority of the population that ascribes to homeopathy, it certainly is of a concern. And of even greater concern, there's the Public Health Agency of Canada, which is the arm's length promoter for the vaccines and immunization. They have data that shows that upwards of 5% of the population believe that vaccines can be replaced by natural methods and it will offer protection. So that's not an insignificant number. And the aggressive kind of sales techniques for the things like the oscillococcinum or the influenzaum certainly concern us. That's for sure.
You probably hear the same sort of things we do here. It's all natural. It's devoid of chemicals. It's nature's way. It's all this sort of flowery weasel words they use.
Yeah, certainly. There is we do have as far as regulation goes, we do have a directorate called the Marketed Health Products Directorate, which is supposed to sort of quash any kind of bad marketing. But of course, they're complaint based. They don't, they're going after the big fish. And if you're going to get some homeopath from BC who's promoting, flu no-sodes, it's kind of difficult to get their attention. But yeah, that's the kind of point of view that the natural health community takes, and there's certainly knit very well within the larger anti-vaccination community.
Yes.
That are promoting all of the same kind of memes that about. The autism gamut is still alive.
Yeah.
And there's still enough people that are choosing those modalities that is to be worried about. Even more importantly, or more convincingly, we have a public health nurse that joined as a volunteer. We're working on a specific project to tackle this the larger question of anti-vaccination. And she's from Western Canada, and they have it's not uncommon for a public health nurse who in the Western provinces takes care of vaccinations to have a parent come in order to prove that their child is vaccinated, to produce a note from their homeopath saying they've had all of their homeopathic vaccinations, they're good to go, they can go to school. And it's the unfortunate, it's not uncommon, and it's unfortunately down to the public health nurse to say, you know what, this is not real medicine. You can't use this. And of course, that kind of relationship is not one that we're used to having, where you have to sort of challenge somebody's oftentimes deeply held beliefs about the medicine they choose for their kids. And that kind of interface between provider and parent is one that we're trying to target in our upcoming programs as well.
That's staggering. That's just amazing that parents would front up with a note from their homeopath to make that statement. That's wow. Sometimes my jaw hits the ground here, folks, when I'm interviewing people on the Skeptic Zone, and that was one of them. But I hope there's some good news, and we can refer to the press release put out by Bad Science Watch on August the 4th, relating to possibly stronger warning labels.
Yeah, thanks to not only, Bad Science Watch brought this subject up in 2013, but after we started making allies in the public health community, we found out that, we weren't the first ones to bring this up. We may be the first ones targeting the public and trying to make noise about this, but certainly Alberta Public Health and BC Centers for Disease Control in the West, because they had dealt with this issue, as I said before, had reported their concern to Health Canada to say, look, if these no-sodes are being used as vaccine replacements and they are ineffective and dangerous, please pull them from the shelves. And so we made the same argument and had a bit of movement. They ended up putting a label in 2013 on or the regulation said that the labels had to have the wording, quote, this product is neither a vaccine nor an alternative to vaccination. That, of course, is was a success for us in that it was the first time that Health Canada kind of admitted that these products should not be used for these purposes. But, of course, they didn't pull them from the shelves. Now, subsequent to that period, there have been op-eds in the Canadian Medical Association Journal. And this spring, there was a very strongly worded position paper by the Canadian Pediatric Society saying, look, no-sodes should not be used. We have great reservations about them. There's no evidence they work. Please do not vaccinate your children with no-sodes. They don't work. They're unprotected. And that, in concert with the CBC Marketplace, who's done a couple programs now, they actually did a hidden camera thing last fall, where they actually had a parent go into a homeopath, and they were given information by the homeopath that was anti-vax, and suggested that no-sodes could be used to treat your child. And that, combined with our work, I think, pushed Health Canada to the limits this year. Now, they didn't, unfortunately, pull the products from the shelves. This is a very thorny issue. After the products are out there, you can the producers can come back to Health Canada and say, well, you approved us before, what now? Like we gave you our paragraph from the homeopathic pharmacopoeia, which is all you need to get approval, right, under the traditional use guidelines. Wow. Not any evidence, and so we can sell these products. So why don't you let us sell them? So what they did, in fact, this April, was that the health minister, or the Minister of Health, Rona Ambrose, put out a statement saying that the new labels will be the following. Now, imagine getting this onto a small tube of sugar pills, but just bear with me for 1 second. It says, quote, this product is neither a vaccine nor an alternative to vaccination. And it goes on, this product has not been proven to prevent infection. Health Canada does not recommend its use in children and advises that your child receive all routine vaccinations. So that's pretty strong wording. So we're happy about that. This is that you couldn't really put stronger wording on it. They also, at the same time, put out, which is a bizarre kind of admission, that the process for approving these products is quite silly. That they also put out a statement saying that the Health Canada will no longer approve specific health claims on homeopathic products for cough, cold, and flu for children 12 and under. Now, believe it or not, there's 139 products that they have approved for cough, cold, and flu for children under 12, which I was a bit staggered by as well. I go, that's a lot of products to be, you can imagine how many products you have for cough and cold you have in your pharmacy. There's 139 of them homeopathic that are approved. Anyways, so they basically said, oh, well, we're not going to approve these products for specific health claims for that. The unstated premise, of course, is that they are going to approve for other categories. Specific health claims. Like the process for approval is really just silly. They use what's called risk-based assessments. So if your claim is very low risk, then the evidence you have to supply for it is also low risk. To get approval for a homeopathic product, all you really have to show is that call it its name, which is not included in the claim. So I can call something pertussin, which is whooping cough, but I don't have to make any claims. Well, calling it pertussin is the claim, right? It sounds like you're using it to prevent pertussis, which is whooping cough. And the same thing goes for influenza and other no-sodes. So the process is really just is a bit of a joke. You can get approval in under 10 in as little as 10 days for any kind of product that you want. So it really is just a rubber stamping. So while we're very happy that they put this labeling on, the department really needs to look inwardly and realize that they are approving things without any kind of scientific evidence.
It does really sound sadly similar to the story here in Australia, where to get a product listed, as they call it, in our system, you really don't have to supply decent evidence at all. You can supply evidence to the effect that, it's been traditionally used by people for thousands of years, and here it is in this book and that book. So I'm sad to say the situations are sadly similar, but at least there's this health warning that's gone out, and that must be a step in the right direction. And homeopathy always strikes me as probably the classic case of people being completely deluded into thinking something is real.
There's been a slow watering down of what was originally a bit more of a robust system that had high-level scientists working for them. One of the scientists that used to work for Health Canada is one of our advisors, Dr. Brian Foster, and he's a medical chemist and is used to one of his specialties is understanding how different herbal and organic compounds interact with the liver and kidneys, and the threats they pose to, and doing analysis to see if they pose a threat. And they basically retired many of their senior scientists at Health Canada, and we know that they've replaced them with people like naturopaths, who may have undergrad in a Bachelor of Science, but they also have their naturopathic doctor specialty, which means they are certainly coming from a certain point of view. That when you think about what the products are that they're approving, it's not surprising that the naturopaths are being used to help approve them, because they are the ones who are going to evaluate if these products are traditionally used. But I don't think we've ever, a naturopath has ever met a remedy they don't like. Like, they'll use anything. If you look at their scope of practice, they'll use traditional Chinese medicine, homeopathy, water therapy, acupuncture, and anything else, herbal remedies. And energy, Reiki, like, they'll use anything. So those are not the people we want in charge, certainly. So we're going to continue fighting for this, and hopefully Health Canada, through this constant pressure, will over time make their process rigorous. Certainly, we're not going to give up just with this one small victory.
Excellent. That's good news. I'm glad you're not going to give up, because none of us can afford to give up. There's so much. Well, what can we say? There's so many interesting things out there for us to confront, not only in Australia, but in Canada as well. Folks, the website to visit is www.badsciencewatch.ca, CA for Canada, or you can check out www.stopnosodes, that's stop, then NOSODES.org to find out more information. Michael Kruse, thank you very much. Thank you for doing what you're doing in Canada. It's all part of a worldwide effort, and who knows, maybe in 60 years when I'm interviewing you, we can talk about how homeopathy is now in the history books.
Yes, one could only hope. Thanks, Richard.
One can only hope. Thank you, Michael. The Skeptic Magazine, the journal from Australian skeptics. Subscribe online to the world's second oldest skeptical magazine. Visit www.skeptics.com.au and click the publications link. You can also find there over 30 years of back issues free to download. The Skeptic, the magazine from Australian skeptics. It's the Raw Skeptic Report with Heidi Robertson.
Hello everyone. Over the coming months I'll be talking about various infectious diseases and the vaccines designed to protect us against them. I'll cover the facts, the myths, and include some interviews with people who have been directly affected by these diseases. This week I'll be talking about influenza and interviewing Kelly, a member of our Northern Rivers Vaccination Supporters Group. The information in this podcast is all available on our website, the Northern Rivers Vaccination Supporters, at www.nrvs.info. It was written by our very own Dr. Rachel Heap and fact-checked by Professor Boy at NCIRS. That's the National Centre for Immunisation Research and Surveillance. Let's start with some facts about the influenza disease. Influenza is a contagious viral disease. It is estimated that there are an average of over 13,500 hospitalisations due to influenza per year in Australia, and over 3,000 deaths per year in Australians aged over 50 years old. More severe disease commonly occurs in those with underlying diseases such as asthma, emphysema, obesity, heart disease, diabetes, the elderly, and in those of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island heritage, and in pregnant women. However, influenza can be fatal even in the young, fit and healthy with no underlying medical problems. The virus. There are various types of influenza virus. Broadly, they are classified into types A, B and C, with A and B more commonly involved in human disease. Both influenza A and B viruses undergo frequent changes in their surface antigens. This results in a phenomenon known as antigenic drift, which means that from year to year the influenza virus is subtly different. It is because of this change in antigenic appearance that the virus can evade an immune system that has been previously exposed through disease or vaccination. It is for this reason that the flu vaccine is subtly different every year, and it is for this reason that yearly vaccinations are advocated. Under the right circumstances, a new subtype of influenza can emerge. When this type of major change in the influenza virus occurs, it is known as antigenic shift. Because the immune system has never been exposed to viruses of this new subtype before, and has no ability to recognise it and combat it, the virus tends to cause very severe infections with a high mortality rate. This kind of change can lead to influenza pandemics. How contagious is it? The severity of flu seasons vary from year to year, depending on the circulating virus and the susceptibility of the population. For example, there were over 10,000 cases in Australia in the first half of 2011, compared with approximately 1,570 for the same period in 2010. During regular seasonal influenza, the attack rate within the community is generally 5 to 10%. That is, 5 to 10% of the population catch it when it is going around. During pandemic years, the attack rate can be as high as 20 to 25% and will be 2 to 3 times higher for close household contacts. The influenza pandemic of 1918 to 1919 killed more people than World War I. It is not certain how many people died, but estimates are as high as 50 to 100 million people. It is thought that about 25% of the world's population was infected. Now to the vaccine. The composition of vaccines for use in Australia is determined annually by the Australian Influenza Vaccine Committee. Influenza vaccines normally contain 3 recommended strains of virus, 2 influenza A subtypes and influenza B, representing currently circulating viruses. The effectiveness of the influenza vaccine varies from year to year, depending on how closely matched the vaccine is to the circulating strains, how virulent the circulating strain is, and of course the immunocompetence of the person receiving the vaccine. On average, however, the influenza vaccine is 60 to 85% effective at preventing disease in young children and about 60% effective in adults. Influenza vaccines are recommended for all people over the age of 6 months who wish to reduce their risk of contracting influenza. Even more importantly, there are certain people who really should be vaccinated each year. This includes the following groups: adults aged greater than or equal to 65 years, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people aged greater than or equal to 15 years, pregnant women, immunocompromised persons, individuals aged greater than or equal to 6 months with specified medical conditions that put them at increased risk of influenza complications. High-risk background medical conditions include chronic respiratory and cardiac disease such as asthma or coronary artery disease, chronic neurological conditions such as spinal cord injury or multiple sclerosis, and diabetes. It is also important for the following groups to receive the vaccine: all healthcare providers, particularly those of immunocompromised patients, staff or volunteers working in nursing homes, staff or volunteers working in long-term care facilities, household contacts including children greater than 6 months of age, of those in high-risk groups, staff working in early childhood education and care, staff or volunteers providing care to homeless people. Adverse effects to any vaccination can and do occur. However, these are usually very minor or extremely rare. 1 to 10% of people suffer from some fever, malaise and myalgia, which may mimic influenza infection, but this is mild and short-lived. In children less than 5 years of age, these side effects may be more pronounced. A sore arm with redness and swelling can occur at the injection site. However, most patients report that these events are transient and resolve fully within a few days. In 2010, an excess of fever and febrile convulsions following influenza vaccination was reported in children aged less than 5 years, particularly children aged less than 3 years. This was associated only with one manufacturer's vaccine, Fluvax and Fluvax Junior by CSL Limited, and this vaccine is no longer registered for use in children aged less than 5 years and is not recommended for administration in children aged less than 10 years. Immediate adverse events, such as hives, are a rare consequence of influenza vaccination and probably represent an allergic response to the egg protein. However, even a history of anaphylaxis with eggs is not an absolute contraindication to the vaccination, but should be done in consultation with a medical provider. A small increased risk of Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is transient paralysis, was associated historically with one influenza vaccine in the United States in 1976. But since then, close surveillance has shown that Guillain-Barré syndrome occurs at a very low rate of up to 1 in 1 million doses of influenza vaccine and is more common after the influenza disease itself. One of the most common myths you hear from people who have received the influenza vaccine in the past is that they will never get it again because it actually caused them to get influenza. Now, this is actually impossible, and I'm quoting straight from a meme, again, that Dr. Rachel Heap has written and which is available on our website, and it reads as follows. After a flu vaccine, you may feel a little unwell for a short time with symptoms such as a temporary mild fever and fatigue. This is not influenza. Influenza is an illness that lasts for weeks and can lead to persistent high fevers, prolonged muscle pain, headache, respiratory failure, cardiac failure, and death. The reasons why you might have flu-like symptoms after the influenza vaccine. 1. You mount an excellent immune response to the vaccine, which can make you feel mildly unwell for a short time. 2. You caught influenza before the vaccine had a chance to work. It takes 2 weeks for it to reach maximum effectiveness. 3. You caught a strain of influenza not covered by the vaccine. The vaccine covers the strains expected to be the most common and most dangerous for the season, but there are others. And 4. You might just have a nasty cold. So I'm here with Kelly, one of the members of our Northern Rivers Vaccination Supporters Group. How are you today, Kelly?
I'm good, thanks, Heidi.
That's good. Thanks for joining us. As you know, we're having a bit of a series on vaccine-preventable diseases and vaccinations, and I wanted to interview people that had been personally affected by some of these diseases, and you've got quite a story to tell us about your experiences with the influenza virus in particular. Kelly, would you mind by starting to tell us a bit about what happened when you were a very small baby with influenza?
Yeah, sure, definitely, Heidi. I was 1 and 10 months of age, and my mother had passed away from influenza. She was sick for a few days prior and had a bit of a nasty cough. She went to visit her own mother along with me, and her mum did say to her, you know, Leslie, you've got a bad cough there, you should go and see the doctor. And she replied with, oh, I'm okay, the big G's going to look after me. She never made the doctor's visit, and 3 days later she had passed away in her bedroom, which was actually a bedroom that I'd shared as an infant in a cot next to her. That's the information that I've been told from her mum.
Yeah, that must have been a dreadful, A, growing up without a mother, and B, also knowing that your mother passed away in the same room as you when you were just very young.
Yeah, I often wonder what I was thinking and how long I may have been there for and those sorts of things without anybody knowing. But, yeah, I haven't gone into much of that detail. But, yeah, I often wonder about that situation. And, now knowing it's, you can do a little bit more about those sorts of things, or maybe she should have gone and seen the doctor. But perhaps looking after a child, children always become a priority.
Yeah, you can certainly understand. I mean, ourselves as mothers, we always do tend to put our children before ourselves, don't we? And it's incredible how fast influenza can affect people, and she clearly went downhill very, very quickly. Have you shared that story with many of your friends or colleagues? And if you have, what's sort of been their reaction to it?
Over the years, I have probably had a bit of a chat to a few friends, and, you can instantly see the look on their face. I think, their jaw drops a little bit. I've grown up knowing what I've known, and I've become quite used to it. So it's something I don't really talk about a great deal because now I'm an adult. But as a young child, I used to think, everyone's got a parent, everyone's got family, and the things they do, they've got brothers and sisters and all those sorts of things, and am I missing out on something?
You also had your own very close call with influenza. Can you lead us through the story about what happened with that?
Yeah, I was 40 and I just finished one of my semesters at uni for nursing, and about 3 days later I just collapsed on the floor at home, and I was taken off to our local hospital, John Flynn, spent a week there just monitoring me. They just said that I basically, the bug went up through my vagus nerve and went straight to probably my brain to make me sort of pass out, and then I was just was sort of probably unconscious for quite a few days, just on a drip and whatever they could do. And I suppose at that point you do sort of feel like it was a bit of a near-death experience. And since then I actually do have the influenza shot every year, so that was the wake-up call to say, hey, look, maybe you do need to have this yourself. Every year I get it. I have a son who has asthma, so I'll make sure he gets it now too.
So you actually ended up with a complication from influenza called pericarditis, is that right?
That's correct.
That's an inflammation around the heart, so the virus actually travelled to your heart as well. Can you tell us how that sort of impacts on your life and your career choices and sort of your day-to-day activities?
Yeah, for definitely the first 6 to 8 months, I didn't have much energy. I couldn't hardly walk to the letterbox because it was physically exhausting to do that. And then if I did something that was a little bit too much one day, then I would be out for the next 3, and it just took forever. So basically I ended up going back to another hospital, Alabaster. Had to find somebody who could sort of help me out. And that they discovered that I had suffered for 3 months with some fluid and inflammation around the heart. They just put me on some medication to reduce that. About twice a year I might actually have to go on a dose again, because it's either a flu or cold season or just being tired and running around. It sort of maybe perhaps builds up again, then I just get the pain and the exhaustion around the heart again, and then I just go into medication. And that's like 3 years ago now. So it can stay with you for quite a long time. I'm hoping it'll go away someday, but yeah, I'm surprised it's still around this long. And so that's what I now have to live with, is the fact that I do get this pain around the heart, and catching another cold would certainly, make it a lot worse.
Yes, it must be quite frightening to get that pain around the heart. I guess you can identify now what it is and what's causing it, but it must still be quite a frightening thing to experience.
It does feel like you're having a heart attack. It's like a stabbing pain, and then in the back on the shoulder and down the left arm, in the jaw. So you're getting all those similar sensations, but it's inflammation of the heart, trying to make sure that, you put yourself at ease and, hey, look, I'm not going to die. I'm okay. I'm not having a heart attack. But, yeah, just be aware that, and particularly when you start to get tired. So, and I've actually become a member to a couple of pericarditis groups, which I've found on Facebook, and they've been very helpful with resources because there's not a lot of information out there, but of how to deal with it. And some of the things I've found that work really well is actually sleeping on my chest when I'm having a week or so of an attack, whether it just puts the fluid into another part and helps the body to absorb it, I don't know. But yeah, it's just the friction.
And the pericarditis actually, correct me if I'm wrong, but it actually restricted your, or made you think twice about a career in nursing as well. Is that right?
That's correct. I'm now more susceptible when I get sick for having an attack, and I worry about what would the next attack actually do to my heart, because some outcomes aren't very good. So, yes, unfortunately I stopped doing nursing because I would have had to have gone on placement and been in places where there's lots of bacteria and viruses, and then I would have been susceptible to probably being sick again. So I had to take a career change. Yes, had to reassess pretty much everything. It's amazing what an effect influenza has had, first of all, with losing your mother at such a young age, and then impacting on yourself and your career. And one great thing that has come out of it is that you're now a proud vaccination advocate and supporter. And in sharing your story, I think it's going to be really enlightening and really helpful for other people who don't realise, perhaps until hearing your story, about just how important it is to get your annual influenza vaccine. So thank you so much for sharing your story. What would you say to people that still have doubts about having their annual influenza vaccine? It is truly, truly important, because it can just take somebody walking past you. It's going to have a little cough, and those little tiny airborne droplets, you'll get very, very sick, and you may not have time to say goodbye to someone that you love, because they can kill you.
Well, thank you, Kelly. Thank you very much for your time.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you, Heidi.
All the information, as I said, given in this podcast can be found on our website, nrvs.info, and we're also on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks, everyone. Till next time.
Welcome to A Week in Science from RiAus, bringing you the science you need to know. Our obsession with cake is never ending, but did you know how much science is involved in every piece? Firstly, let's look at the role of each ingredient in making your piece of cake nice and fluffy, starting with sugar. When you cream butter and sugar together, air gets trapped on the rough surface of the sugar crystals, giving you a foamy batter. The fat in the butter coats these air bubbles, helping to hold them in the mixture. However, when they heat up, these bubbles pop, leaving you with a flat and dense cake. But that's where eggs come in. The proteins also coat these air bubbles. When these proteins are heated, they harden, stopping the bubble from popping and trapping the air inside the cake. Baking powder is the last ingredient in making your cake nice and fluffy. It is a mixture of bicarbonates of soda and cream of tartar, an alkali and an acid, which react with heat and water to form carbon dioxide. This helps expand those air bubbles, adding yet another level of fluffiness. So what role does flour have then? Well, flour proteins combine to form gluten, which forms a stretchy web structure through the cake. As the air bubbles are expanding, the gluten stretches to contain them. When the gluten reaches about 80 degrees, it hardens, preventing the cake from collapsing inwards and maintaining its expanded shape, leaving you with a light, fluffy cake. The second role of flour is to provide starch. This helps the egg proteins stay strong and trap those air bubbles inside and form the final texture of the cake. And now, 4 fast facts about cakes. Cakes as we know them probably only came about in the 18th or 19th century with the advent of baking powders, replacing yeast as the leavening agent. Some people add salt into cakes. Salt in sweet, what? But it does help strengthen that gluten structure. Despite saying that gluten is vital for creating the structure of the cake, too much gluten can result in a heavy texture. The amount of butter helps control that reaction. And sugar also helps the caramelization reaction, called the Maillard reaction, giving that golden surface on top. That's it for this Week in Science. For more information on the science of baking, sink your sweet tooth into the RiAus website, riaus.org.au. Follow us on Twitter at RiAus and like us on Facebook. I'm Ben Lewis, and we'll catch you next week.
Gregoire. And I'm Dan Beeston. And we're from Smart Enough to Know Better, a podcast of science, comedy and ignorance. And we're inviting you to our 100th episode live show. It takes place on the 1st of September at 7 p.m. at the Brisbane Powerhouse Theatre. And guess what? It's free! It's a game show where you get to win fabulous prizes just by sharing your own stories of science. 1st of September, 7 p.m. at the Brisbane Powerhouse. Free, free, free. Check smartenough.org for details.
I'm here at King O'Malley's Irish Pub in Civic in Canberra, and who do I have with me here tonight?
So I'm Glen Nagle from the CSIRO Canberra Deep Space Communication Complex, part of NASA's Deep Space Network.
And what brings you here tonight? Like, what have you been presenting to us tonight?
Yes, so tonight we've been doing Science in the Pub, looking at Pluto and the encounter with that dwarf world just a few weeks ago in July. Myself and with two amazing speakers, Nobel Prize winner Professor Brian Schmidt and Dr. Alan Duffy, an astronomer from Swinburne University.
So what was CSIRO's role in all of this?
Okay, so our role is as part of NASA's Deep Space Network. So the CSIRO actually manages the tracking station out at Tidbinbilla. And our job is to provide communications to all the spacecraft out across the solar system. So uplinking commands to the spacecraft, telling it where to go, what to do every day, what not to crash into, unless you want to crash into it, what information to collect and then send back home. And we get that information, we process it, eliminating all the random noise of the universe, and just send the cleaned up signal off to the Jet Propulsion Labs in California, JPL, and then they distribute it out to the science teams who then, make the discoveries and tell us what they find.
So was it really 9 years between the launch and the first signals?
Yeah, so the spacecraft launched on the 19th of January 2006. So the journey was 5.3 billion kilometres, 9.5 years to get all the way to Pluto. An amazing rocket, and you consider that this is the most powerful rocket they built at the time. It launched from Cape Canaveral. It passed the orbit of the moon just 9 hours after liftoff. It was really moving. I mean, the Apollo missions took 4 days to get to the moon. It did it in just 9 hours. And then it headed off to Jupiter for a rendezvous there just 13 months after the launch. Normally that's sort of a 2-year journey. Got a gravitational kick from Jupiter, headed on out. But we had contact with it at various times. Every Monday it phoned home. It was a little beacon call to say, I'm still here, everything's okay, is there anything you want me to do? And that's, it occasionally did some various bits of science and observations. We did some test runs at the encounter. But really the big moment was, sort of the 14th of July, 2015. And at 9:49 and 57 seconds, the spacecraft made its closest approach to Pluto.
And what was it like being in the room? We're just waiting for that signal. It must have been really, really tense.
Yeah, we actually have a thing that we call professional excitement. We've got a job to do. The tension really is for the science team, over at the Johns Hopkins University. They're all crowded around their screens and waiting for particularly the phone home signal, because New Horizons was actually out of contact with us during its entire encounter with Pluto, 14 hours. We had the last contact here in Canberra with it at about 9 p.m. And so 49 minutes and 57 seconds later, the spacecraft was busy doing its encounter, turning its instruments to look at the planet, look at the moons, and learn everything it can about it, and whizzing past at 55,000 kilometres per hour. And then we were all waiting for this phone home signal, which was coming the next morning, after the encounter. And yeah, there was a lot of tension. Fortunately, in Canberra, we were kind of off the hook. It was our station over in Spain who was responsible for it. We'd handed it over to them. And watching the science team, we were all huddled watching on screens. It had been a long night for us, so we were tired, but we were really just waiting. Has it all worked? We had the last contact. We're going to have another contact through the network. Will the science team be happy? Lo and behold, signal came in exactly on time. Sent it straight over to JPL, straight to the science team. The cheers that erupted, not only at the Mission Control Centre, but at JPL, and of course here in Canberra. We were just elated. Being part of history, once again.
So what was the first image that you saw, or piece of data?
So there was a couple of images. One was the full face of Pluto, and this was actually a shot that was actually taken before the closest approach to the encounter. It was taken about 70,000 kilometres from the planet. But NASA sort of held that back because they wanted to release it at the time when the spacecraft was flying past Pluto. So when we're out of contact and people were sort of going, what's happening? So to mark that moment, they showed that full hemisphere view, and that will be the sort of shot will be in the textbooks for the next 100 years or more until we get new shots. And then the next shot to come back was the close-up surface shots, and they were received in Canberra. And some of the closest views of the surface, but still only a resolution of about 1.3 kilometres per pixel. We're going to get much better stuff back. These were just quick snapshots that we got, little sort of Kodak moments. We've got much higher resolution stuff that's coming down starting in September, and they will be getting down to about 100 metres per pixel resolution across some parts of Pluto. So there's a lot more to come, but seeing those first images, I think it took everybody's breath away. As was said tonight at the talk, Alan Duffy was saying that Pluto had thought it was just going to be this frozen ball, very uninteresting. But this thing had mountains, it had valleys, it had ice glaciers on its surface. It's full of surprises, this world, and we're all just stunned.
So how long did you say we're going to keep getting data from it? It was about 16 months, I believe?
Yeah, so the spacecraft starting in September this year will actually start downlinking all of its data on board. Mm-hmm. And the data rate is only about 1 to 2 kilobits a second. So it's a fairly low data rate. We think we can up that a little bit to maybe 4 to 6 kilobits a second. And that will still take around about 12 to 16 months to downlink all the data. And
what's up for you and for CSIRO in this regard in the future? Like, what's next after the data is downloaded? What are the future plans?
Well, New Horizons, of course, will continue on. We could have contact with it for at least another 30 years, maybe a couple of more encounters in the late part of this decade and in the middle of the next decade with some of the Kuiper Belt objects out there. But, of course, we're busy every single day. We have over 40 missions out across the solar system, representing 22 different countries around the world that are exploring. So we've got plenty. We've got 7 missions at Mars at the moment. It's the traffic jam of the solar system. And we've got a new mission launching to Mars in March, the InSight mission, which is a mission to do seismological studies of Mars and learn about the interior of the planet. The Europeans next year are also launching the ExoMars mission, their first rover to go to Mars. In December this year, we've got the Japanese mission Akatsuki, hopefully arriving at Venus. There's another missions going off to asteroids. We've got the Rosetta mission that's still ongoing in orbit around the comet Churyumov-Gerasimenko. There's so much happening there. We've never a dull moment. We're 24/7 talking to spacecraft.
Well, we thank you for all that CSIRO has done. Thank you very much, Glen Nagle. Hope to talk to you again sometime.
Thanks very much. Good to speak to you.
Our friends from the Canberra Skeptics would like you to know they're holding an evening with Jo Nagle on Thursday the 22nd of October 2015 at 6 p.m. at the Copeland Theatre, Building 25 Kingsley Street at ANU. Now this is free for members, but only $5 for non-members. Canberra Skeptics is delighted to present a Q&A with one of the leading figures in the skeptical movement, Jo Nagle. Jo is being called the modern Sherlock Holmes and the real-life Scully. Jo has spent his life being an investigator of historical, paranormal and forensic mysteries, myths and hoaxes. For further information, please visit canberraskeptics.org.au.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone, and I'm sorry, Joe, that the Chinese duck with the pickled vegetables didn't quite work out as planned.
And I'm sorry you're going to have to work out how to clean the ceiling in your kitchen.
And the floor and the cupboard. But the peanut mochi balls were pretty good.
They are fantastic.
They are fantastic. That's one of the benefits of living in Sydney. We have access to all this wonderful international food. We should have another podcast for that.
A food podcast.
What an idea. The Skeptical Foodie podcast or something like that.
Where we can eat all of the MSG that we want and there'll be no ill effects because we know that it's not harmful.
and gluten everything.
Ah.
Could you imagine how that podcast would work? Would we say, welcome to the podcast, and I'll have that one. And it'd be all like that one. It'd be disgusting.
Yeah, I don't think that that's a great idea.
I don't think that's a great idea. Now, coming up on the Skeptic Zone next week, we have an evidence please with you.
Oh, I'm getting dobbed in.
Yeah. And what can people look forward to on the next show?
Oh, I'm probably, I imagine, going to be talking about Michael Kruse, the cartoonist.
Oh,
yes.
Very famous cartoonist here in Australia.
Yes, he is. He's been publishing, well, he's done several books, but he gets a daily, I think it's daily, comic in the Age newspaper at the moment. And he did one last week that wasn't really so great.
Not so great. It was basically a very big anti-vax statement, which is got a lot of people worried and a lot of people dismayed that their favourite cartoonist turns out to be an anti-vaxxer. Anyway, you're going to be looking into that.
Yeah, he's got a little bit of form there in the past. He has done it before, but never quite this blatant. And yeah,
it's sad to see.
It's very disappointing.
Anyway, more about that next week. Hopefully some more from Maynard. He's on assignment at the moment. Actually, he's down in Victoria working on a movie. Helping doing interviews on a movie. So that's very exciting.
I believe that's actually with Tim Ferguson. Yeah.
And don't forget, folks, to go to maynard.com.au for all of Maynard's crazy podcasts like Bunga Bunga. It's quite a lot of fun.
It is.
It's a lot of fun. Hello to Maynard if you're listening. All right, so that's all from this week. Joe, again, thank you very much. And thank you, Think Inc. and the National Geographic Channel here in Australia for helping us get to see the fabulous Neil deGrasse Tyson. And Joe, I've got some interesting news for people living in Sydney. If you want to hear me talk about how I produce the Skeptic Zone, I'm giving a talk at the Sydney Podcasters Meetup group. Now that's at meetup.com/podcasting-Sydney, or Google Sydney Podcasters and Meetup. This is on Monday, the 31st of August, so pretty soon. 6:30 p.m. at the Chippendale Hotel, and you just head downstairs at the Chippendale Hotel, and that's at 87 Abercrombie Street in Chippendale. So yeah, if you want to come along, join that meetup group, or just come along. I hope to give an interesting talk about how I make the Skeptic Zone each week. You often wonder, don't you, Joe?
I do indeed.
Well, I think I'm ready for a good lie down, Joe. It's been a big couple of days, and thank you again. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders and
Jo Alabaster
signing off from Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for contacts, an archive of all episodes since 2008, and our online store. Please support the Skeptic Zone by following us on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, liking us on Facebook, and leaving a review on iTunes. You can also show your support by subscribing via PayPal for as little as 99 cents a week. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian Skeptics Inc. or any other skeptical organisation. The Skeptic Zone. That should be the new theme. Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, episode number 300 and...
Oh, there's an Easter egg for you.
That's my favourite show.